Hello class, today we are going to go over telling time to the nearest minute. These are going to be our standards for our lesson, and our objective is by the end of this lesson, students will be able to tell and write time to the nearest minute and measure time intervals in minutes. Time. We are going to go over telling time to the nearest minute, and we are also going to go over word problems about time. I'm going to have you play this little game right here to get our minds thinking about what we learned last year about time. What we are going to cover, we are going to start with an introduction to time, which is going to show and define an analog and digital clock. And we are also going to learn about the different qualities of time / an analog clock, because that's what we're going to tell time by. Then we're going to talk about telling time, which is we are going to tell and write time to the nearest minute and measure time intervals in minutes. And then lastly, we are going to have word problems, which are going to solve word problems involving addition and subtraction of time intervals in minutes. Our introduction to time. What we are going to learn. Qualities of a clock. So we're going to learn an analog clock, a digital clock. We're going to learn about the hour hand or the shorthand of the clock. We're going to learn about the minute hand or the long hand of the clock. And we are going to also learn about how many hours are on a clock and how many minutes are on a clock. Okay, so an analog clock, which shows time with two moving hands, which is moving in a circular motion, and the clock face is marked from 1 to 2. This is a picture of an analog clock using Roman numerals. So it's a little easier. This is going to be 1. This would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're going to have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then you have a digital clock, which you all should be pretty familiar with. It's the clock on your phone and stuff, which is a clock that displays time in numerical digits rather than by hands on a dial. So we're going to go over qualities of an analog clock. Your hour hand is going to be your shorthand. So as you can see on this clock, this is our hour hand. We also have a minute hand, which is your long hand, which is this clock right here, which is telling the minute of the current hour. And then some analog clocks will have second hand, so it's going to be a really thin long hand, and that's going to tell you the seconds of the current minute. So for clocks, we have 12 hours on the clock, so you have 1 through 12. And you're going to have 60 minutes, which each of these little things is a minute. So, as you can see, on the inside of this clock, we have our hours, while on the outside of this clock, we have our minutes. So our hours are going to go 1 through 12, and then our minutes are actually going to go 0 through 60. But each hour is going to be a 5-minute increment. So 1 hour, so at 1, if the minute hand is at 1, you're going to have 5 minutes. If it's at 2, it's going to have 10 minutes. And then on other clocks, there's going to be little dashes in between here that is each minute being shown. So we are now going to talk about telling time. Telling time to the nearest minute. We are first going to determine what the hour hand is on. So for this hour hand, it's between 9 and 10, which means it's 9 o'clock. We are then going to determine what two numbers the minute hand are between. So for here, the minute hand is between 7 and 8. And then you want to determine how many dashes have passed between those. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, which means it's 4 minutes after whatever this 7 is. You now need to determine what minutes that hour represents. So for here, you go 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So 7 is 35. And then 36, 37, 38, 39. So this clock shows the time that is 9:39. If you do need to count the individual tick marks, if it's easier, it would just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. What time appears on this clock? As you can see, for this clock, the hour hand, which is this shorter hand right here, is between 12 and 1 o'clock, which is going to mean it's 12 o'clock. Now 12 what we have to now determine. So we got to find where the minute hand is, so it's between 7 and 8. And from our last problem, we do already know that 7 is 35 minutes. So then you just have to count the tick marks after 7. So 35, 36, 37. So this time it's going to end up being 12:37. Now I'm going to have you guys determine what hour this clock is showing. So we need to look first at just these, the shorthand, and these singular numbers. So as you can see, this shorthand is between 5 and 6. So what hour is it? It's going to be 5 o'clock. You're now going to determine what minutes this is showing. So it's still the same clock, so it's still 5. We just need to determine where this minute hand right here is. So we know 1 is going to be 5, 2 is 10 minutes, 3 is 15 minutes. So how many more check marks do we have? Yeah, we have 3. So we go 15, 16, 17, 18. So this time is 5:18. Now you are going to do this clock by yourself. So you're going to start by telling me the hour of this clock. And now you're going to show the minutes of this clock. This is going to be 3:03. Now we are going to work on the word problems. We are first going to start by reading the answers fully and then highlighting the important information. So Miss Williams is making dinner. She marinated the roast beef for 210 minutes. How much time in hours did she marinate the roast beef? So we know that for every 1 hour, it's equal to 60 minutes. When we do that, we find out that she marinated it for 3 hours and 30 minutes. Now, if she started roasting the beef at 5:15, what time did she start marinating it? So we want to start at the 5 and then go back 3 hours. So 5 minus 3 is going to be 2:15. And then from 2:15, we need to minus that extra 30 minutes. So you get to 2 subtracting 15 minutes. So you have to subtract another 15 minutes to get your time, which is going to end up being 1:45. After 96 minutes, the beef was done. When was the beef done? So if we started at 5 hours and 15 minutes, we know that every 60 minutes we have 1 hour. So 96 minus 60 is going to end up being 36. So we need to add an hour to that. So that would be 6. And then we know we have 36 left. So 36 plus 15, which means that this was done at 6:51. We also know that she took the frozen corn out of the freezer at 6:10. So that was we want to highlight this 6:10. She started cooking the corn at 7:12. How much time was the corn out of the freezer? So 6:10 is going to be written like this. And we want to get to 7:10. So we know, as we can see here, we have 1 hour pass and 2 minutes. So you can also write that as just minutes. So for 1 hour, it's 60 minutes. So you have 62 minutes. It was out of the freezer. So the corn was cooked for 8 minutes. What time was the corn cooked? So she started the cooked corn at 7:12, and it cooked for 8 minutes. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So at 7:20, the corn was cooked. These next problems you are going to do by yourself, so you can pause and do them. So on Friday, Dr. Monroe usually comes into his office clinic at 9:30 in the morning and leaves at noon. For the first appointment is usually 12 minutes after Dr. Monroe arrives. When is his first appointment on most Fridays? Pause the video and take your time answering this question. So because it is 12 minutes after the time he arrives and he arrives at 9:30, your answer is going to be 9:42. Then says, however, Dr. Monroe came in at 9:50 in the morning on the Friday. How much later was Dr. Monroe than he usually is? Now that you've done that yourself, from 9:30 to 9:50, we see that 20 minutes have passed. And question number 3 says, if the first patient came in 5 minutes before the scheduled time and Dr. Monroe let the patient in right after he arrived at the office, how long did that patient wait for his appointment? So you should know that the patient arrived at 9:37, which was 5 minutes before 9:42. Dr. Monroe let him in at 9:50, so the patient waited for 13 minutes. Four, Dr. Monroe asked the first patient to rest at home for 8 hours after his appointment. How many minutes did the patient have to rest? So 8 times 60 is equal to 480. So the patient had to rest for 480 minutes. Number 5 says the last appointment of the day was at 11:45 and it took 56 minutes. Compared to the usual time, how much later did Dr. Monroe leave the office? The last appointment ended at 12:41. 56 minutes after 11:45. Dr. Monroe usually leaves the office at noon, which is 12. So he left the office 41 minutes later than his usual time. And then it says Dr. Monroe spent a total of 150 minutes with patients. How many hours is that? So you want to do the 150 divided by the 60, which is going to get you 2 hours and 30 minutes. You are now going to do some practice by yourself on this Jamboard link. So if you go to that, you can answer those questions. And then once you're done with that, we are going to play a little Kahoot game. That's the end of the lesson.